Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. It is Monday, July 25th. I was just saying to Josh a couple minutes ago before we went on board, I can't not believe that it is July 25th already. This year has just flown by. But welcome to another episode of Marketing Mondays. As I always do, I'm going to take 1 second to ping the groups in, and then we will get going. Hopefully you guys had a great weekend. You're ready to get this week started, and we'll jump in here in a second and get going. Let a couple people file in. It's good to see everybody. Like I said, hopefully you had a great weekend. I know it's been hot all over many parts of the United States, so hopefully you guys are staying cool. Hopefully that actually means good things for your business. If you're in the window film business, typically hot weather is good for the business. Good to see you, Tim, David, Christy. Good morning, David, Sorreo. Good to see you. You're probably dying down there in Florida, David. I don't envy you at all, but it's been humid everywhere, I think. But with that, let's go ahead and get going. I know we've got a half hour. As always, if you have any questions to ask during the episode, go ahead and put those in the comments. I will see them come across my screen right here, and I can answer those live for you. I will always give a priority to people that tune in live and ask questions. So if you have a question, go ahead and ask it. I do have some questions that came in through the week that we can go ahead and jump into, but don't let that discourage you from going ahead and putting your question in. I will make a point to get to it. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started with the first question. It says, do I need to make new content constantly? I'm running out of things to write about. I could definitely empathize with that because we create a lot of content here at iMagnet Management, and a lot of times there's not 50 different ways to say the same thing. So a lot of times you feel like you're repeating yourself. So I'm going to go over a couple different things to think about when you're creating content. And we're going to talk about this with regard to your website, and we're going to talk about it with regard to your social media, because I think they're two distinctly different things. So let's talk first about your website. On your website, you're going to have pages on your website, which I would consider to be pillar content, Pillar, like the pillars of a building. Those are going to be your main products and services. So the pillar content on your website, think about that as the pages on your website that define the main products and services that you offer. The other content that you're going to generate, whether that's in a blog, whether that's in a project portfolio, whatever the case may be, you want to think about that content as enhancing the pillars and the strength of the pillar content on your website. So when you're talking about, again, I know a lot of people that are tuning in are in the window film business. So let's talk about, like home window films or home window tint. And, you have a page on your website dedicated to that process, but you're also creating content about projects you've been working on and things like that, or different benefits of home window film. What you want to do is you want to create content that then links back to that home page. So when you put the words home window film or something like that in the content, backlink it to your main home window film page on your website. That's going to strengthen that pillar. The other thing to think about is to break down the things that you maybe talk about in your main page about the benefits. Let's say you have the main benefits of that product or service on your main page, but you give it like a paragraph or 3 to 5 sentences to talk about that benefit. Well, think about the ways you can create additional content is to break those benefits up into individual pieces of content. So write maybe a piece of content about each individual benefit individually, but then again, link it back to your main page. So that's going to give you the ability to have more content that's not what they would call duplicate content. Like you never want to create content that basically duplicates what's already on your website. But you do want to create content that enhances what's already on your website and then link back to that content, as I mentioned, to strengthen the pillar content on your website. So hopefully that makes sense so far. As far as running out of things to write, you don't always have to write new things. Oftentimes what you can do is, as you've thought about it more, or you could go back to a content you maybe created a year ago or a year and a half ago and revisit that. Often you'll find that there's ways that you can reword something, maybe add something new to it, maybe enhance it a little bit, and then you can refresh that content. I've read and I've listened to a lot of different things about content on your website to help your SEO. And a lot of times it's not about just creating tons of new content, although creating new content is often good. A lot of times it's going back and kind of weeding your garden, if you will, like going back and enhancing and improving the content that's already there. A lot of times there's just as much advantage to going back and enhancing or improving content that's already there than as there is in creating a brand new piece of content. So if you feel like you've written about everything there's possible to write about and you're running out of things to write about, consider going back and actually updating, revising, enhancing content that's already there. Now that's with regard to the website. We've talked a little bit about that. Let's talk about social media. You got to think about social media the way that the current algorithm is. Not everybody is going to see your posts, for one. So a lot of times it's not, if you posted something and then a couple weeks later you post it again, don't look at that as regurgitating the same content. A lot of times you'll get in front of a lot of people that didn't even see the first post. So with a lot of really successful pages, you'll see there's an ongoing effort to not only create new content, but then recycle content, good content that they've already had, repost it again a couple weeks later, a couple months later. And again, some of that content is what would be called evergreen, which means the nature of the content never really goes bad. It never goes out of date, if you will. It's always ripe. It's always good to share. So in that type of content, you may want to consider going back and resharing content that you've already had, so you don't feel that pressure to have to always create something new every single week, every single post, create something new. Maybe go back and reshare something that you really liked that you did 6 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago or whatever. So again, that's one of the things that you can do to, if you're in this rut that this person that wrote the question said, is they feel like they're running out of things to write. Try reusing, enhancing, recycling content that you've already had and try making that better. Maybe rewording the copy a little bit, maybe using the same image, but rewording the copy a little bit, making that a little bit better is a way to kind of recycle and enhance that content even on social media. So hopefully that helps with that question. I know we kind of went into a couple different directions, but I think it's important with regard to that. I think we got a couple questions too. Tim asks, on a website, doesn't it help to just change like colors or maybe a few words in the content to keep it relevant on search engines so they don't think the site is dormant? What you're getting at there, Tim, is Google does, we'll just talk about Google because just so you guys know, Google represents 80 to 90% of the search engine traffic in the entire world. So yes, there's things like Bing and other things, but let's just talk about Google because Google's far and away the largest search engine out there. So Google does like to see changes to your website, updates to your website, a website that's not been dormant, to use your word, for a long period of time where no changes have been made. What I would say is think about ways to go in and make substantive changes that don't have to be just something like changing a color or something like that. Certainly if you feel like you want to change the color because you want to do a little bit of rebranding, there's nothing wrong with that per se, to change the color, but I wouldn't go in there and change the color just to try to play against this Google algorithm and wanting to see things different. I would look at going in there and maybe revising a blog article, doing things like that, or adding some new content, changing out some pictures on your website, making sure those pictures you're changing out on your website are optimized so that they're not just on there in an unoptimized way. I would go on there and make changes like that. Sorry, we've got some sirens going by outside, so hopefully that's not you guys are still able to hear me. But anyway, I would make changes that make sense. I wouldn't just go in to change a color just to change a color to try to game the system with Google. I would just make substantive changes. There's always plenty of things you can do to tweak on your website, change out a picture, change out some copy, change out a little bit of the wording, things like that are going to be relevant. And they're also going to allow Google to see that there's changes that have happened to your website without resorting to gimmicky type stuff. So hopefully that helps, Tim. Again, I always look at it like if you ever go back and reread content that you put on your website, you probably will always come up with, oh, I should have said that, or I could have added this sentence, or I could have explained that a little bit better. Those are the things to go in. And when you think about things like that, go in and add that new piece of that new sentence, that new paragraph, whatever, to explain it a little bit better. That's how your content's going to continue to be enhanced, not by just going in and trying to kind of do something to just sort of make a change just for the sake of making a change. Brandon asks, how do we know if SEO is working? That's a great question, Brandon. One of the things we've talked about here is I view it as a red flag if any agency or company were to come to you and say, hey, within a certain number of days, months, whatever, we're going to put you at the top of page 1. Without knowing your particular market or the particular area you're trying to service or the particular product or category you're trying to service, it's almost impossible to guarantee how quickly you're going to go up the rankings and get to the top of page 1. It's just no reputable company typically is going to guarantee those things, because the reason is this is not happening in a static environment. The other companies that you might view as competitors also may be paying an agency that's trying to do things for their SEO and things like that. So it's impossible to know that as you're making changes, they can be making changes as well, and how all those things are going to play out in the Google algorithm as to how quickly you elevate. Now, to answer your question, how do you know if it's working? One of the ways I look at is the best way to know if something's working is before you start any SEO, before you do anything, pick out 10 keywords / key phrases that you want to rank for, and then go into what's called an incognito browser. And I'm not going to go into how to get into an incognito browser. You could do it on Safari. You could do it on Chrome. Just Google how to open an incognito browser. What that is a browser that's going to be stripped of any cache or history or anything like that, cookies, so that when you're doing the search, it's truly a raw search. It's not pulling from any previous searches of pages you've looked at. So open up an incognito browser and search these 10 keywords or key phrases and annotate where you come up, whether that's the middle of page 1, whether that's the bottom of page 2, wherever it is, the good, the bad, and the ugly, annotate where you come up on specific searches. And that's before you do any SEO. Now, 1 month into a company working on your SEO, or you're working on your SEO, go in, open up another incognito browser and search those same 10 keywords or key phrases and see where you come up and track. Now, what you should start to see if you're making an effort to improve your SEO in those particular areas is you should start to see an improvement. So let's say you showed up on the middle of page 2. Maybe now you're showing up more towards the top of page 2, or maybe you moved up 2 spots. Maybe you moved from the middle of page 2 to more towards the top third of page 2. Maybe you moved from the top of page 2 to the bottom of page 1. So what you're looking for when you're trying to measure whether the SEO efforts that you're doing are working, or whether you're seeing improvements on those keywords and key phrases that you're trying to come up for. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't go to the top of page 1, depending on your particular market or the competition. It doesn't mean you will, though. But what you're looking for is improvement. Again, if you're putting in effort, what you want to see is that you're seeing your SEO be improved over time. Again, I'm not saying that, by doing the right things, you won't go to the top of page 1 in 30, 60, 90, 6 months, whatever. It just is not, in my mind, when a company guarantees that, it's almost impossible to guarantee that. The other thing I would be doing with regard to SEO is tracking where you're coming up in the Google Maps and the localized Google listings, where you see the pin and they have the company's listing. That's going to be derived more from what you're doing on your Google business page and what's happening there. And I feel like that Google business page is almost like a second half of your website. So as much as you're going to optimize your website, you want to be thinking of optimizing that page as well, because that's going to determine where you're coming up in those localized listings. So I would be tracking that as well, not just where you come up in the organic search, but where you come up in the local listings as well. And ideally, you want to see both of those moving in the positive direction. In an ideal situation, you get to the point where you may have a top of page 1 organic result, and you may have a very top listing in the Google local results in the map pack in those areas as well. So you actually have 2 listings on the top of the page, and that would be ideal. So, anyway, hopefully that answers your question, Brandon. You actually said my agency sold me on this exact spiel. Again, what I would do, Brandon, before they really start doing a lot of work, figure out where you're showing up right now, and then figure out where you're showing up, within a couple months or things like that, or 30 days. 30 days is usually enough time to hopefully see a little bit of movement and track it. And you should be able to tell whether you're improving or not. One of the negative things that happens when a lot of companies do this is they say you got to give it 6 months to work or whatever. And then what happens at the end of 6 months? They've collected 6 months of your payment. And at the end of 6 months, if you haven't gotten the results you want, you may quit and leave, but they've still collected 6 months of your thing. So what sort of guarantee? Are they going to refund your money in 6 months if you're not at the top of page one? Ask those questions, because again, I'm not saying all agencies, but a lot of agencies use the tactic of it's just a numbers game. If they can get enough people to sign on, even if they don't produce the results at the end of 6 months and people bail out, they've collected a lot of money in the meantime. So just be careful. Make sure, companies that are reputable should be willing to share with you what they're doing, how they're testing, how they're measuring their results, things like that. And I think as long as you're sticking with good, reputable companies, Brandon, you should see an improvement in the results. But again, most companies that are reputable aren't going to guarantee you how quickly you're going to show up at the top of page one. So I don't see any follow-up questions of that. So we will get jumping into the next thing. This is kind of related to SEO, so it kind of goes along with what we've been talking about. It says, when writing an article, blog, or portfolio piece on my website, how important is it to, let me make sure, integrate as many keywords as possible? So great question. It is important to use your keywords. You want to use the main keywords you want to show up for. You want to use them in your title. You want to use them in your alt tags for your images that you're using. You want to utilize them in the content of the blog or the article or the portfolio piece. What you don't want to do is what's called keyword stuffing. You don't want to write something in such a way that it doesn't make sense when you read it, because it seems like you're going over and above to try to stick this keyword in everywhere and anywhere you can in the article, and it feels like it's not natural and it feels like it's not done. One of the things with Google is they actually, through artificial intelligence, actually read your articles. They read the content on your website, and things like grammar and things like that make a difference. It can make a difference in your search engine results, whether you've written something well or you've not written something well, whether something is written in such a way that Google's artificial intelligence would view it as being done properly, or done in a way that would be called keyword stuffing, like you're trying to stuff keywords in as many areas as you can. So be careful. Definitely use your keywords, use them in the titles, use them in the alt tags, use them in any what's called like H1, H2, H3 areas of your particular piece of content. I'm not saying not to use them, but only use them in a natural way that when somebody's reading your article, it would seem natural that keyword would be there. Don't try to overuse them, or you can actually fall on the other side of the equation and actually be doing yourself more harm than good. So hopefully that makes sense. Again, there's a fine line there. I would always read your content as if, like, once you're done with it, read it. And if you're reading it and you feel like there's times where it just doesn't feel like that word would, in normal speaking or normal writing, would be there, but you were forcing it in there to try to get that keyword in there, that's where I would remove it. So Shamal actually says, just make sure you collect reviews, and those reviews will generate traffic all day. Make sure that you post pics and 30-second videos, and then you'll see a lot of difference. I didn't have an SEO company's. Okay. Yeah, I agree with Shamal. Like, obviously collecting reviews, especially with regard to localized marketing with regard to Google Business, collecting reviews and posting pictures and things like that. It definitely, that type of activity is really going to help you. So thanks, Shamal, for that. And if you have any follow-up questions, Brandon, please let me know. Like I said, hopefully that answered your question and gave you something to go on with regard to measuring the success on that. Okay, man, we got a lot of questions with regard to content. So should I focus on making content that is more generalized in nature or based on news, events, the season, etc.? Okay. Okay. I think I understand what they're asking for. So they're asking, should they create content on their website that's going to be valid or representative all year long, or should they try to basically hack away at things that are happening, like posts regarding, something that had to do with the Super Bowl when it's the time for the year of the Super Bowl, or 4th of July, or try to take advantage of maybe something that's in the headlines of the news or something like that? What I would say is ideally you want to have a mix. You want to have content on your website and in your social media feed that's more generalized. That seems to be true at all times, just talks about your products and services in a way that's not trying to tie it to anything ripped out of the local news. But there's also a time when, if there is a big news story and you have the ability to hack at that, the popularity of that story, I think there's an opportunity there to utilize that to get a little bit more a little bit more views and a little bit more traction out of that post. So I don't think it's an either or thing. I don't think you want to always try to hack away at something that's in the news or the time of year or something like that. But I don't think you never want to do that either. I do think there's a place for what I mentioned earlier is evergreen content about your product or service that's always true. I think there's always a place for mixing content like that in. I do think, whether it's on social media or your website, using, something ripped from the headlines or a latest news story or something like that to sort of make a little bit of, a joke, although please be careful that you don't go over a line with a joke or something like that. But if you can comment on something that's in the news and tie it into your product and service in a way that's maybe fun or funny or relevant, I think there's always a way to do that. You just got to be careful. One example is right after some recent shootings at the school down in Uvalde, Texas. We had some content queued up for a couple of clients that was talking about school safety. And we decided to pull that content because we didn't actually want that to feel like we were like ambulance chasing, like within the week after that tragedy happened, that we were posting something about school safety. So we actually decided to create some different content and come back to that school safety post at some point in the future, because we didn't want the feeling from the public to be that we were trying to take advantage of that tragedy or leverage that tragedy. So you've always got to be careful when you're doing these things and kind of try to read the tea leaves and not put yourself in a bad situation where somebody can take what you're doing and misconstrue it or think that you're trying to do something inappropriate. So let me see. Brandon, yeah, please, if you need to message me later, just, go ahead. You can reach me via DM, whatever. Good to see everybody drop it in. So with regard to some of the things we talked about, again, creating content. We had a lot of questions about content is important, but you want to make sure you have a purpose for it. Don't just generate content for no reason. You either want to be bolstering those pillar pieces of content on your website. You want to be using it to essentially enhance or to highlight something about your product or service. You want to use it to maybe create a situation where maybe something that's in the news, you're tying your product to that or something like that. But have a purpose for why you're creating every piece of content. Don't just mindlessly just continue to generate content, especially like the first question that came out, that they said they're running out of things to think about. If you feel like you're bored of what you're writing and that you're running out of things to think about, there's a good chance the people that are reading it will feel bored and not want to read it as well. So if you can't bring something new to the table, if you don't have a purpose or you don't have a reason for writing it, don't just write it to just jam another piece of content on your website. Try to go at it with a purpose of what you're trying to accomplish with this piece of content. I mentioned several different things that might be what you're trying to accomplish. So hopefully in answering these first 3 questions, we actually touched on a lot of different things there. So I do have another question here. Yeah, we still got some time. It says, should I use my customer email list to create a Facebook audience? So I think what they're talking about there is a way in the back of Facebook to where you could take an email list and you can enter it up into your Facebook thing, and they will create an audience of people that are on Facebook that match that email address. So say you upload 5,000 emails to Facebook, but only 3,800 of them have Facebook accounts. You will now have an audience on Facebook of those 3,800 people exclusively. So you can then run ads that don't show up on your social media page per se, but that you can run them specifically to target those 13 people. Now, where that may come in is those people, typically, if you have their email, in a lot of cases, that maybe means they've done business with you in the past. So you can run some pretty innovative remarketing campaigns to sort of say, if somebody's used your service in the past, sort of run an ad specific to that audience that speaks to them as if they are a past customer, and give them a benefit to come back for additional service or things like that. So there is a way to utilize that to reach people that have already done business with you and reach back out to them and hopefully bring in more business, or maybe create a referral opportunity or something of that nature. The other way you can use that is somewhat, a lot of people haven't really done this as much, but one of the other ways you can use that audience is you can make what Facebook calls a lookalike audience. So let's talk about that same 5,000 person email list. You've uploaded that. What Facebook will do is they will find common traits among those 5,000 people, or we had said there's 3,800 that match up to a Facebook account. So they'll take that 3,800 and they will find common traits among those 3,800 people. And then what you could do to Facebook is say, please create a lookalike audience of 50,000 people that look like those 3,800 people. So they will match those common traits that those 3,800 people have. They will look for another 50,000 people that have those same shared traits. And you can create an audience that's called a lookalike audience based on that. Now, why would you want to do that? The idea is using the power of data to say, if these are people that have done business with you, it's safe to assume that if they have these common traits and you market to an audience with similar common traits, that the potential of the conversion being higher versus a random 50,000 people would be better. So you're saying if there's certain traits among these people that have done business with me, and I create another 50,000 that look like those, and you compare that to just a random group of 50,000, the 50,000 that have traits that look like the 3,800 that have already done business with you should have a higher conversion rate and should do better for you than the random list of 50,000. So that's the reason you would want to create a lookalike audience and utilize those. As with anything else with marketing related, you have to do some testing. Create a lookalike audience, run some ads, see if in fact that's true. In some cases, we've seen clients get really good results with lookalike audiences, and in other cases, not so much. You have to do the testing. You have to do run the ads and see what the data is. In certain situations, maybe those common traits really do relate really well to somebody that would convert. And in other cases, maybe they don't relate at all. So the only way you're going to find that out is to run those ads and look at the results and test the results. So that's the 2 different ways that you could utilize an email list you have maybe from your CRM or something like that to actually try to improve your social media marketing. So with that, we are right at the time limit. So we just don't have enough time to jump into another question unless somebody's got any clarification on something that I just said. But I hope you guys enjoyed this session. Again, we got into a lot of content creation and things like that. And I think that that's all good. Hopefully you guys found benefit in that. And then this last question with regard to social media marketing. I appreciate you guys tuning in on a Monday morning as always. And I hope to always bring you guys value that you guys can take out this week and maybe utilize in your own marketing efforts. So with that, we are right at the 10:30 Eastern Standard Time mark. and I'm going to go ahead and sign off. But if you have any questions you'd like to get on for next week, go ahead and please send me an email. You can send it at Patric with no K, Patric at imagnetmgt.com. And I'd be happy to answer those on the next week's episode. We typically try to have these every week at 10 o'clock a.m. Monday morning, Eastern Standard Time. So I hope to see you in a future episode. Take care. Thanks, everybody, for watching.